World Rugby Rankings as we lead into the semi-finals of the Rugby World Cup. It's an interesting look because you notice the top four teams, if I kind of get out the way, 1, 2, 3, and 4, those are your semi-finalists, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Those are your losing quarter-finalists, and then from 9 onwards, those are teams who did not make the knockout stages of the Rugby World Cup. It kind of makes sense because the points that you get during the World Cup matches are doubled, so it kind of pushes the teams who make it further in the tournament to the top and really punishes the teams that don't make it. So the All Blacks there first, 92.47. There's a bit of a gap between them and everyone else. And you think about it, if you look at when where the teams were ranked going into the Rugby World Cup, the All Blacks were actually second behind Ireland. So they are back in kind of a familiar first spot. Then there's very little between England and Wales. You'll notice England's got a little green arrow there because they are up from last week rather than from before the World Cup. And Wales are down from last week. There's not much between England and Wales, 89.74 and 89.37. I think basically England had a bigger win, so they got slightly more credit for their win than France's very narrow win over, Wales's very narrow win over France. So I wouldn't be reading too much into that. Both those sides were 3 and 5 respectively going into the Rugby World Cup. So the fact that Wales were second prior to this week, I guess speaks to some of their performance levels. And South Africa in fourth. They were fifth last week, but fourth going into the World Cup. So it's kind of steady as she goes for them. But I think the All Black South Africa final is still the favourite with the bookies. So whether you go by the rugby rankings or whether you go by the bookies, kind of leave that to you guys. Outside of the top four, Ireland are kind of one of the big losers of the cycle thus far, down from first from before the Rugby World Cup. I think before this week they were fourth, so from fourth to fifth for them with another loss out of the Rugby World Cup with their loss to the All Blacks. So that Australia are steady in sixth. They were sixth last week, and they were sixth going into the Rugby World Cup. So that's just kind of where they're at. They've always kind of flirted between those kind of top 5 teams and then the next cluster. So they're edging their way down at the moment. And France on 80.88 are actually up overall. And they went into the Rugby World Cup in 8th, did the French. So I guess the fact that they made the quarterfinals was probably the minimum pass requirement. So I guess that's where they're at. Japan, although it says down here, that's down from last week where they were 7th. It's kind of up overall because they went into the tournament in 10th spot. So overall, you'd say Japan have done pretty well in the world rankings. Scotland, their one says no change, but they were 7th going into the World Cup. So the fact that they are now 9th, again, it reflects that performance in that pool, the results which didn't go their way. Everyone else is pretty steady, although Argentina have actually moved up from 11th. Fiji have moved down from 9th. This is steady week on week, but I guess if they haven't been playing, there's going to be no changes for them. Italy are up, Tonga are up, Georgia are down, Samoa, who are off the board, they are in 15th, up from 16th. USA is probably the other big loser alongside Ireland. I know it's a different end of the board, but USA are now ranked 17th. They were 13th going into the Rugby World Cup, so they have dropped a fair few places. The fact they didn't get any points, yeah, I guess that's reflected in the rankings. So, yeah, that's where we're at in the rugby rankings. It's kind of a few groups. Like you look at New Zealand 92, then there's those 3 teams in 2, 3, and 4. There's very little between them, and then there's Ireland kind of take that spot now where they're floating between the top teams and that second group. Then Wallabies, France, Japan, Scotland, Argentina. That's another group on its own. So whether or not you would rank Fiji, who are kind of another one floating between amongst those guys, I mean, the fact they lost to Uruguay, I might say no. Where were Uruguay on this list? I will just double check. Uruguay were 18th. I should mention they are up 1 from 19th, so kudos to them for that victory, but not a huge shift for them. Italy, Tonga, and Georgia. It's always a hard one with the Italians because the world ranking system doesn't work in their favour with all the losses they usually accumulate in the Six Nations. But you look at the last time they played Georgia, they did get a win. So, yeah, it's an interesting one, the old rugby world rankings. If these are to be believed, then the real World Cup final, which I know will probably make South Africans and Welsh fans pretty mad, is England-New Zealand. But that being said, before the World Cup, the world rankings would have had the World Cup final as Ireland and New Zealand. So we've already seen that one too. So I suppose if South Africa win and New Zealand win, that will put them first and second, and then we get another first, second lineup. I'll have to double check the calculations as what would happen if England and Wales go through. Would that also be 1 and 2? I should have done that before I recorded this video. Hey, too late now. I'm not going back. But yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts on the world rankings. I haven't looked at them for a while. The World Cup has kind of had things floating around quite a lot. But yeah, as I mentioned, they do go beyond 14. They go across the board. Check out the world rankings if you like. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.